Hello and welcome to today's Hot Topics training on best practices for employee transition for Sage Intacct users. We'll also review the R4 2022 new release of Sage Intacct. I'm Sarah Novak, Marketing Manager at LBMC Technology Solutions, and just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is muted, so if there's anything you need during the presentation, please let me know using the chat panel. We will be taking questions throughout today's webinar and we'll answer as many as we can. If not, we will be following up with you. We also will be providing CPE for this webinar. In order to qualify for the CPE credits, you must stay on the entire session and answer any polling questions when prompted. We will be sending out a recording of this session in a few days' time. And one other important thing, make sure you stay on after our presentation, and we have a special lunch gift card that will be coming your way from our special guest, Mitch McCaw. He's from Topalti, and Mitch will be talking about their end-to-end AP solutions. So make sure you stay on after. We've got a special presentation for you today. So for our Hot Topics training, we have Melissa Powell, and she's with has been with LBMC for 4 years now. She serves as our Senior Sales Engineer and Implementation Specialist. And she's really glad to be here today. And thanks again for joining us. And Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Well, as Sarah mentioned, my name is Melissa Powell. Happy to be here with you guys today. We are going to be talking about employee transition for Intacct users as part of our Hot Topics presentation today. After that, the topic is discussed, we will move on to the release notes for R4 of 2022. And then from there, we will move on to our presentation from Topalti. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I am going to go ahead and toggle off my video just so we don't have any glitches or anything like that as we move through the presentation. But obviously, if you have any questions or anything as we go, please feel free to let Sarah know, and we will be navigating questions as we go through the presentation. Now, employee transition for Sage Intacct users. This is often part of what is called a database update section of a company or organization's ETP. So if you don't know what an ETP is, we are going to talk about that as well. See if I can get to the next slide here. There we go. Okay, so our agenda for today is going to include discussing what an ETP is. What database adjustments do I need to check in Sage Intacct when a user is no longer with my company or organization? How does Sage Intacct manage user subscriptions? What database adjustments do I need to make when a new Sage Intacct user is added? How do I access training or other things for a new Sage Intacct user? And what logins or systems should my new users have access to? So what is an ETP? An ETP is an employee transition plan. So often this is a living document that organizations use to structure any type of transition that might happen in the organization. So these can be tailored to employees exiting the organization, entering the organization, or a role transition. They might include things like position information, key contacts that a person would need in that position or role, their roles and responsibilities. If they're exiting, maybe outstanding projects or tasks, training plans that might be included, and database updates. Now, the database updates portion is the portion that we are going to focus on today, and this will be specifically for database updates relating to Sage Intacct. So if you have multiple databases that a person might use in a certain position, obviously your database updates section of the ETP would have multiple systems in there and would have plan for database updates for each of those systems. So out of today's session, if you don't currently have an ETP, you should be able to develop an ETP and formulate the database update section in regard to Sage Intacct. So a lot of the times people are doing this with just a checklist type of thing. So as we go to the presentation today, you'll see different areas that you might check and update in relation to somebody exiting the organization or somebody entering. And within there, you can go ahead and, add or make a checklist similar to this to be able to create that database update section within your ETP.
All right, and now we're going to have our first polling question. So that polling question is open. It'll be open for a couple of minutes. If anybody has any trouble accessing the polling question or responding, please make sure that you send me a chat just so I have that on record. Okay, Melissa, it looks like we've had most people answer. If you want to go ahead and continue on.
Okay, perfect. See if I can get this to talk. There we go. Giving me issues today. Technology is great when it works, right? All right, so the first section, where might I find user records in Intacct? So this is really relating to when somebody might leave or exit the organization or have a role change out of their current role into a new role. So there are typical places that people think of to look for an actual user record in Intacct, but then there's some other areas as well. So we do get a lot of support tickets where somebody has inactivated a user, but it has kind of bogged down a workflow because that user was used in a workflow. So there's several areas. The ones on the left are usually pretty common that people, check these places and know where to look. So under company, and we're going to look at this together, but there's a contact record for each employee. There's an employee record for each employee, and there's a user record. Okay. And then also you might be listed as a manager on a certain dimension, such as a location dimension, department dimension, or project dimension. Some other areas in an approval workflow where a user might actually be found could be in your general ledger configuration if somebody is assigned to do journal entry approvals. It could also be in the accounts payable configuration if someone is assigned to approve AP bills or AP payments. It could be in the purchasing configuration if somebody is assigned to do any type of purchasing approval. Also in timesheet approvals and expense report approvals. So we're going to look at these sections together. That way we know where to go and where to check in case somebody leaves the organization and we might need to change or toggle that user record to somebody else. All right, so within Sage Intacct, okay. So the most common area, of course, to check that most people know and navigate to just intuitively is going to be company, admin, and our users, okay? So our user listing shows several users here. And so, for example, if Emma is the one leaving the organization, we can very easily go ahead and click edit, and we can toggle her to inactive. Now, the reason this is kind of grayed out is because Emma is actually the company contact in this environment as well. So if you ever see this grayed out, it does mean that you will need to go to company, and there's a nice little admin section here where you can see Emma is that administrative contact. So we would need to toggle that to another person if Emma is the one leaving the organization. And then when we go into our user record, we can toggle that from active to inactive. Now, the other place you might see this, it's pretty common for people to intuitively navigate to, is under the employee listing if you are using this. So under reports and employees, Emma should be an employee here as well. So there's Emma's employee record. So we would, of course, want to make sure to inactivate her as an employee as well. Now, the employee and the user record do both create a contact record. And the contact, if you've ever used a Rolodex, I call this like a big Rolodex. So Emma should have a contact record as well. Sometimes it's the first initial last name. I'm going to look at her actual employee record. Sometimes the contact is set up a little bit different. So we can see here that primary contact is last name Penny, first name Emma. So we'll look for it that way. Okay, so there she is. There's the contact. So again, we can go ahead and toggle that from active to inactive. And then save that. Also on the dimension records, as mentioned, so under things like locations could have a manager assigned. So we would always want to check those and see if Emma is a manager assigned to any of those locations. Departments as well. Departments can have managers assigned. So we would want to check these and see if Emma is a manager on any of those departments. Thank you. If you are using projects as well, projects do have a manager ID. So obviously not everybody's using projects, but if you are, you would want to scan that for that ID as well. Now, some of the other places that are not as common to look for are in those approval workflows, and this is where a lot of people get stuck. So obviously, if you inactivate a user, it does kind of kick that user out of the system. But if you have approval workflows set up that are going to be in general ledger or AP or purchasing or timesheets or expenses, just because you inactivated the user, it does not change the approval workflow. So you would actually need to go in and check the approval workflows in these spots to see if that user for Emma still remains, and if so, change that to somebody else. So let's look at our first one, which is in General Ledger. So under General Ledger Configuration, there's an area called Approval Options. If you have enabled journal entry approvals checked, then it will open up these boxes down here. If you do not have it checked, it will not open up any of those boxes, and you wouldn't need to do anything here because you don't have those types of approvals enabled. But if we do have those types of approvals enabled, again, if Emma is the one that's leaving, we can see here that Emma is actually our admin approver. She also approves payroll journals. So we would want to make sure that we toggle that to somebody else. So again, if we just inactivate her user, that does not change anything here. So what happens in this scenario is that the system will still be trying to route this to Emma. Okay, so we do want to make sure that those are changed. The next section would be an AP configuration. So this would be AP setup configuration. This would be if you have any type of approvals on AP bills or AP payments that go out. So we'll scroll down to our section for those two things. Okay, so these two sections right here, we have bill approval settings and we have payment approval settings. So again, you have to have these enabled. You can see here this one is not enabled. If I do enable this, it expands this out. So I know that I'm using that setting, or if it's not checked, then it's going to kind of collapse that area. So I know I'm not using it. So first on our AP bill approval, so we can see here that we have an unrestricted user. That user is not Emma, so we're okay there. That's somebody else. In our specific approval policies as well, we'll want to check those, and we do see that we have a rule type here where Emma is the approver. So again, in this scenario that we have, we would want to make sure that we toggle this to an active new user and that we take Emma out of here before we inactivate her. Now on payment approvals, it's a little different. So we'll talk about this. You do have different levels within here. And so your levels, if you are using this, it's value-based. So let's just think if we had levels we want a level 1 approver to approve any checks over $500. We want a level 2 approver to approve anything over $10,000. Now, where do you actually see these levels? These levels are on the user permissions themselves. So this actually will go ahead, and when you inactivate the user, it will inactivate that level as well. But we do want to make sure somebody else has that level. So for example, if we look at Emma's permissions and roles that she has, we can see we will go down to the AP section. So I'm going to kind of scroll through this fast so we can get to that section, but that's the section we're looking for specifically. So we can see right here this AP bill approval levels. So we have level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Emma has everything basically. And on approved payments, she has all those levels as well. So if our setup in our configuration says that we need a level 1 approver to do that $500 and a level 2 to do $10,000 or over, if we inactivate Emma and nobody else has those level 1 or level 2 approvers, this is going to get stuck in the workflow. Okay, so if we are inactivating Emma and she has access to one of those or both of those, we need to make sure now that somebody else has those on their permissions. Okay, so the next section is purchasing approvals. So again, within purchasing, the purchasing module, we'll go to the setup area, configuration. And if you are ever weary about changing something in configuration, that is absolutely okay. You can always reach out to us and we can help you navigate some of these things. I know it's a little scary back here in configuration. So this is our approval area in purchasing. So we do have purchasing approval enabled. So again, we want to look at that unrestricted user first. We don't have Emma there, so that part is good, but we do want to look at our approval policies as well. So we will pull those up. And it looks like we have approval workflows on our purchase requisition, our purchase order, and our blanket PO. So we're going to want to look at these. And this is not Emma, so we are okay on that one. We'll want to check each one of these. This is not Emma, so we are okay. And this is not Emma. So we are all good on our purchasing configuration. Okay, so if any of those are Emma, we got to toggle them to a new user. Now, same thing on our timesheet. You do have the time and expense module and configuration. I will say this one's a little tricky because if we look in here, the only approval types you're going to see in the configuration area is on our expense reports. And that's because the timesheet is actually under projects configuration. I just want to keep you on your toes. So there's our expense report approval settings. We do have these enabled. Now this one is very similar to the AP bill approvals in that it's levels. Okay, so we'd have levels assigned here. And then again, permission based, those people would be assigned permissions for those levels. So if Emma's the only one that has maybe a level 3, and she's leaving, we need to make sure somebody else has that level. We also want to check our unrestricted user, make sure that's not Emma. So that one is good to go. Like I said, your timesheet one is actually not found in time and expense configuration. It is found in your projects configuration. I know that's a little weird. Now, if you're ever trying to find something as well, some people know this and some people do not. Just remember that this is web-based, so I can always click Control Find and start typing in the word. Right, so approval. I'm searching for approval, and that kind of navigated and highlighted my timesheet approval settings. So we'll click Enable so you can see what this looks like. So this is just listed by, again, our unrestricted, and then our first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And so these are user-based types of things. We could assign different users, right, to be the first, second, third. So if Emma, again, is one of those users or is the unrestricted approver, and the unrestricted approver, if you don't know, means just a master approver. So they can kind of override all the other approvers should they need to do that. So again, if any of those are Emma, we want to go ahead and toggle those off. All right, Sarah, we can go ahead and do our polling question at this time.
All right, polling question number 2 is open. This is a true or false question. While the poll is open, Melissa, we do have a question, and it's around what you've been talking about. This person asked, does this process change if the employee is not leaving the company, but is moving to a position that will no longer have access to Intact? Specifically, they're thinking about inactivating the employee area.
So yeah, if somebody is still going to be an employee, but they're not going to have any access to Intact, I would still leave the employee record and the contact record because that is attached to the employee record. But I would want to inactivate the user and then check all those other areas to make sure that user is not used in a workflow.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It's a great question.
And the poll is about to end. If you want to reveal the correct, well, the correct answer is false. Melissa, I don't know if you want to say anything more on that.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the thing that we get tickets on is people think inactivating the user is going to go ahead and activate all of the workflows as well, which is it does not. So just keep that in mind.
Thanks.
Okay, so we will go on to our next area. Okay, so let's talk about how Sage Intacct manages subscription. So we have just talked about, somebody not being a Sage Intacct user anymore. And then usually if that happens, we potentially have a new person coming in as well. So during that transition, we need to decide how we are going to manage our business users in the system. Okay, that way we don't get charged extra if we don't want to get charged for an extra user. So just keep in mind that Intact always manages your subscription on a yearly basis. So everybody hopefully knows their renewal date because knowing your renewal date can really come in handy. Okay. So when you're up for your renewal, let's say that you have negotiated 4 business users and you have decided that that's the 4 that you want to go ahead and have. So your business users are people that do things that affect the GL. They're typically your main accounting type users. And so if you have 4, and you have someone leave the organization, you drop it off, right? And now you're down to 3. So of course, at that point, you're not going to receive an extra bill or anything like that because you're still under your 4. Now, if somebody comes in and you add a new person in, you were at 3 and now you're back up to 4. So in that circumstance, you're not going to receive an extra bill either because you're still at your 4 during that subscription period. Where the tricky thing comes in is that if somebody does not leave before a new person comes in. So sometimes in those circumstances, there's overlap, right? We know a person's going to leave, so we're going to hire a new person. Hopefully the old person's going to train the new person. They're both kind of going to be working at the same time. So you have a couple options there, of course, on how to handle that. One, when the new person comes in, you just add a 5th business user. However, you will be charged for that. So what happens in that scenario is that they are going to send you a bill for another business user, and they're going to prorate that bill to your renewal date. So if I'm only a few months from my renewal date, that might not be such a big deal, right? Because then at renewal, I can drop that 5th one off again and get back to 4. However, if I'm 11 months from my renewal date, right, that might be a bigger deal. So in that circumstance, it might be best to decide Are we going to have the old person go ahead and just inactivate their user and give the new person a user and have that new person be the one entering things into Sage Intacct as the old person's just kind of shadowing and helping train them? And then in that circumstance, of course, as long as you drop off the old user first, add the new user in, you're still at 4. So you're not going to receive an extra bill. Okay, so that's a question we get asked a lot. So just want to make sure we're clear about the subscriptions. Obviously, if you ever have this scenario and if you have any questions on how to handle that, that way you do not get another subscription charge, for a user that you might not be using long term, please just reach out to us and let us know. We are happy to navigate you through that. Okay, so let's go on to the next section.
Well, just to make sure everybody's sure, we have polling question number 3, which is what Melissa was just talking about. So that question is open. And if anybody has any questions around it, of course, reach out to us and we'll help guide you through that. All right, we've just got about another 40 seconds here for the question. All right, so the question was, when I add a new business user in Sage Intacct, as long as I inactivate one afterwards, I will not be charged. The correct answer is false. So you will have as Melissa stated, a prorated amount until you inactivate that other user.
Yep. So we always want to inactivate previous to adding a new user. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about new users coming in through this transition. Okay, so how do we appropriately add a new user? So of course we have different business user types or user types such as business user, employee user. If you're using projects, you might have a project manager user. If you're using inventory, you might have a warehouse users as well. And so those users also can be full or limited for those business users. And so on that, just keep in mind, I will say one of the things we run into sometimes is somebody might turn their admin privileges off for a business user, but that person does need the ability to edit reports. If they do need the ability to edit reports, please make them a limited business user. You can still, in the admin section, as you're doing their permissions, you can make sure all of those admin type of permissions are checked off, but toggling them to a limited admin gives them the ability to edit reports. Now we're going to go into Sage Intacct together, and we are going to look at the appropriate way and steps that we suggest to create your contact record, your employee record, and your user, because these records do need to be linked together in order for workflows to function properly. So our suggestion is always the contact record first, and then your employee, and then your user. So we will go ahead and look at that together in Sage Intacct. Okay, So again, the contact record, if you're not familiar with it, this is basically a big Rolodex for those of us who are old enough to know what a Rolodex is. So in your Rolodex, you basically had cards for every type of contact that you have. And so this is an automatic Rolodex that creates cards. And so a lot of these cards can come from multiple different places. They can come from your vendors, they can come from customers, they can come from employees, they can come from users. So your contacts all dump into this big Rolodex and they can come from multiple different places. And so, as mentioned, your employee records and your user records both need to be linked together, and they are linked together through the contact record. So the easiest way to do that, anytime you're adding a user and you're going to have a user record and an employee record, to make sure they're linked is to create your contact record first, and then we're going to reference that contact card on both of those objects. So I'm just going to use myself as an example here. Okay. Now you can see that this developed a suggested contact name. It usually does last name, comma, first. If you want to delete that and just put first name and last name, that's fine too. However you want that structured is completely up to you. It fills it out automatically, but you can edit that, okay? So this is just basic information here. You do have mailing information. That's completely optional, so no red stars there. Additional information, all of that is completely optional as well. Okay, so we'll save that. That's going to create a contact card that is pal, comma, Melissa. Oh, that already exists, so that's good. We got one in there. That contact is in there, so we are going to attach that to our employee records and our user record. Okay, so if we're in our employee listing and we say to add an employee, basically, once that contact card is created, I should just be able to search. See, I start typing in and it's going to pull up because it's already there. Now I can grab that. Then I can fill in any of my other information that I want on my employee card, and then I can go ahead and save. So now this contact is attached to this employee record. That's what we want. And then our second addition is adding, or our third is adding the actual user. Okay, so your user ID. Usually that's how it's structured. Again, that's completely up to you. And here you see contact name. So again, we want to go ahead and search for the one that is that contact card and attach it here, and then go through the rest of functionality of adding that user. So now you can see how the employee record has that contact card attached and the user record has the same contact card attached. That's what we want in order for all of those pieces to be connected together. If not, if they are used in any approval routing workflows, that can break the workflow, and that's what you would actually look at if you did get an error that indicated it was something with the contact record. We would want to make sure our user contact name and our employee record contact name are the same contact card. Okay. Let's get back to our presentation.
All right, so Melissa, I've launched question number 4, and that was related to what you just discussed. When setting up a new employee, which record should you create first? All right, we've got about 50 more seconds on this question. Right. And of course, the correct answer is to create the contact record first. So if anybody hasn't answered yet, I just gave you the answer, but that is the correct answer.
Freebie for you, those of you who hadn't answered yet, right?
Right.
Great. All right, so what database adjustments do I need to make when a new Sage Intacct user is added? Obviously, we just talked about creating the contact, the employee, and the user. So what else? So think what we went through when a user was leaving, same type of thing. Okay, does my new user need to be involved in any approvals of any sort? So reference those same areas that we went through before: GL, purchasing, accounts payable, expense reports, or timesheets. Okay, so if that new user needs to be involved in any of those, or if they're that master, that unrestricted approver, then we would want to go ahead and update those sections as well. Okay. So how do I access training for a new Sage Intacct user? So the best way, of course, is through the Sage Intacct Learning Center. So there is a new thing, semi-new at least, called the Learning Membership. So if you have not seen the Learning Membership before, it gives you access to several good courses for free. So there are certain things in the Learning Center that are free. There's some things that are paid types of things. There's some that are on demand. There's some that are live trainings. So the learning membership, when you have that, and it can be part of your yearly subscription. So if you're planning to add on, 5, 6 new employees next year, a learning membership might be a really good idea, because you purchase one learning membership for the whole year, and that's going to cover anybody in your organization that needs training. So they're going to have access to a whole plethora of on-demand videos for free, because it's included in that learning membership. So some of those that are really nice are the advanced reporting and insights. So this isn't all of them, but I just kind of put some of the best up here that people really like and that we have found really helpful. Automating taxes is good if you're working with taxes. Managing cash accounts with your bank feeds, getting all of that set up and really working the way it should. They're adding a lot of AI to the bank feeds. That way things can automatically create journal entries or different types of transactions you might need the system to automatically create. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, that's a great training course on that. Automating processes with smart events. So there's a lot of customization you can do within platform services with smart rules, smart events, smart fetches, things like that. So if you're not familiar with that, that's a great course to take to get you more familiar with that. And of course, anything on financial reports, is always great as well. So if you do not have a learning membership currently and you're planning to add some people to your organization, I would highly recommend this. Obviously, we at LBMC do additional training as well. If you need live training for anyone, we can go ahead and get you set up with training through LBMC as well. Now, the different logins, of course. So if there are people that have been around for a while, you probably know that you used to have 3 individual usernames and passwords for all these 3 systems referenced here. Luckily, that changed a little while ago, and that is not the case anymore, but we still do want to make sure that everybody has access to these 3 systems and that they are familiar with them. So the first, of course, is the Sage Intacct accounting system, right? That's where we created our users and things that we just went through. There's also the Sage Intacct community. So the community is, as it suggests, a community of users. Some great things out there are, if you're trying to make dashboards, they have great people who post live examples of dashboards. Also, they have ideas out there, right? So if your users are in Intacct, and they realize things that they want to see Intacct improve, or a field that needs to be different or something like that, people can post ideas and they can vote on those ideas, and some of those ideas get pushed out into the new release. So of course, we want all those users to have access to the community, and of course, the Sage Intacct Learning Center that we just talked about. Now, as mentioned, you used to have 3 usernames and passwords for all of these. And so if you've been around for a while, you probably think that's still the way it is, but it is not. So once you create a Sage Intacct user in the accounting software, then when they go to the community, or they go to the Sage Intacct Learning Center, there is a button now that just says, log in with my Sage user ID. And if they click that, it will go ahead and log them into the system. So you don't have to create those separate user IDs and passwords anymore. Okay, so that concludes our section for our Hot Topics training. And after this, we are going to move on to the Sage Intacct 2022 Release 4. Is there any questions that we have had come in, Sarah, that have not been answered yet?
No, we don't have any additional questions right now, so we can move on to the release training. If anybody thinks of anything, please feel free to still submit it.
Great. Okay. So the next section of our discussion today is going to be on the release for 2022. So of course, there's several things that get released every quarter. New functionality in Intacct might be new user experiences, might be additional modules. So we always go ahead and we kind of scan through everything beforehand, and that's because some of the release notes might be based on users, and sometimes they're more things for us, the implementers. So of course, you guys don't need to know so much what's changing for implementation, but you do need to know what's changing, obviously, on the user side. So part of these presentations every quarter is for us to go ahead and scan through those release notes and kind of pull out those things that are going to be important to you guys and make sure that we go through those and that those things are covered. Now, they do always release the release calendar ahead of time. So that is available right now for 2023 in the release notes. I did put it right here as well. So you can see the release dates for all 4 quarters of next year. I always put these on my calendar, okay? So if you've ever been through a release, you know that they usually start pushing them out Friday evening, goes through Saturday and Sunday, and then when everybody comes in on Monday, they should have pushed out all of the updates over the weekend. So usually I want to know when that is, just so I know and I'm prepared for if things look a little different or have changed, or if I'm looking for something in particular that I know was going to be released that I want to take advantage of. So I would highly recommend putting these on your calendar for next year. So in our for 2022, look, I'm a year ahead of you guys right now. We'll stay in 2022. So R4 of 2022, we have all these different modules that were affected. Okay, so several different modules affected in this. I will say that some of this is still in beta testing. So we will talk about those areas that are active now versus the things that are in beta testing and when those might be released. So let's look at our first area, which is accounts payable. So they have made some enhancements to bank file payments in regards to AP advances. Now this is only for currencies of AUD, EUR, GBP, or ZAR. Okay, so not USD, but they needed this available for some of those other currencies and the way that they function in those countries. So on an AP advance now, you can make the payment method the ACH bank file method. And then once you save that, it's going to go ahead and generate that bank file that then you can go ahead and get that payment from using that bank file. Okay, so not available for USD, although I kind of think it's a good idea. So if it's something you think is a good idea as well and you take advantage of that, definitely put that out in the community, but is available for those other currencies currently. Now, Sage Intacct Planning, SIP, for any of you that are using SIP, they've made a few adjustments to things that just is going to make it easier to navigate in the system as well as edit things. Okay, so we're going to talk about a grid entry view as well as some other things in SIP as well. So the grid, oh, I have a polling question that popped up.
I'm sorry, Melissa. Yes, we have our 5th polling question open. And this is actually going back to the talk on employee transitions.
Okay.
The question is, how do I link the employee record and the user record? Okay, we've got about 30 more seconds. Melissa, sorry if you want to go ahead and continue on with the grid entry.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so for SIP, they now have a grid entry view. You will have to use this little toggle that you see on the screen. So if there's something you're interested in using, make sure that you turn that toggle on first, and then it's going to let you use the grid entry from there. So let's talk about what is included in that grid entry. Okay, so grid entry view allows you to do several things that are pretty cool if you're using SIP. So it's basically going to allow you to double click in the white cells to edit, and you can edit your expenses, your revenues, or your expense adjustments and revenue adjustments. Now keep in mind the only values that are valid are going to be numbers, decimal points, or negative amounts. You can't type any text or anything like that in there, okay? But as long as you do use numbers, decimal points, or negatives, then you can go ahead and just edit those fields now by double clicking on them. Now keep in mind, this is a little caveat, revenues entered as a negative are going to be automatically changed to an expense adjustment type. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you do enter a negative in a revenue area. If the payment spread of a budget line is same amount for each billing and you update a specific month in that grid view, so let's say, I have it spread across and I go in and I double click January and I change that. It is going to change January and everything else. So just keep that in mind. The grid view does allow for copy, cut, and paste functionality as well. So pretty cool stuff there. Now, also in relation to some of the other things within SIP, so you now can filter and customize your data views. Okay, so new filters and customization in there. Also, you'll have the ability to hide any of the menus you're not using. So there's quite a few menus that are getting added there. For you as a user, if you're not using certain ones, you can hide those just to kind of clean it up a little. Okay. Now, compliance updates, this idea came from you. So this is something that came through the Intacct community. So this was an idea that was voted on several times and therefore got pushed to a new release. So now within the Help Center, there is a new compliance section. So this could be really helpful in time for auditing season. You can actually print it off, into PDF, and you can hand it to your auditors, and it will give them information about all of the internal controls and reports and compliance in relation to your Sage Intacct environment. For those of you using Sage Intacct Construction, a few new things being added in this release in relation to Sage Estimating being now integrated with Sage Intacct Construction module and the new Sage Intacct Construction Payroll that is an early adopter that will be released soon to everybody. So let's look at the first one together in relation to Sage Estimating. So Sage for a while has had its own estimating tool. This system does sit outside of Sage Intacct, but now if you have Sage Estimating and you're running Sage Intacct, you can now integrate those two things together. Your subscription requirements in relation to Sage Intacct, you need to have admin, projects, accounts receivable, and the construction module. Okay, so as long as you have those 4 areas, then you can integrate Sage Estimating into Sage Intacct. Also, just keep in mind there's a little bit of different terminology. So this table here kind of shows that a job in Sage Estimating is called a project in Sage Intacct, and so on with those terminology differentiations. So just make sure you're aware of that. If you don't have Sage Estimating, but that's something that you're interested in, definitely let somebody know. We could get you resources. But the features of Sage Estimating, flexible and adaptable takeoff, the ability to keep your bids competitive and profitable, the ability to view estimates in ways that are important, and very, very powerful reporting. So now all of that is going to be integrated with your Sage Intacct accounting system as well. Now, Sage Intacct Construction Payroll. So this is in early adopter right now. So if you want to be enrolled in the early adopter program where you can kind of help proof test this out, please reach out to your account manager. Some of the great functionality that really, really is specific to construction includes handle self-performed trade payrolls, automate complex payroll calculations, simplify certified payroll reporting, reduce cost of overruns, and improve the accuracy of future estimations, which is really, really important, obviously. Harness the power of your data for detailed reporting again, so they're pushing out more detailed reporting with that. And then assist with state payroll needs associated with union and non-union organizations for construction payroll specifically. Okay, so some great things coming out in construction payroll. Now, those of you who are running inventory control and order entry together, a couple of things in relation to that. So fulfillment for sales order management, early adopter program, we're going to talk about some of the additional options within order entry fulfillment and the ability to commit quantities during order entry. Again, this is also in an early adopter. So let's take a look at these two things together. So fulfillment for sales order management that is specific to inventory. So obviously if you're running inventory, there's a few other types of processing transactions that you need to do besides, just creating a sales order. So picking, packing, shipping, right? So you can also see the available actions over there for a sales order to be open, to be marked as ready to pick, picked, ready to pack, pack, ready to ship, shipped, and now ready to invoice. And then, of course, you can invoice the customer from there. So again, all of this is in the early adopter program right now. If you're interested in that, please let us know. We can see if we can get you enrolled, but this will be coming out available to everybody next year. The second, go ahead.
Melissa, sorry, I'm going to interject and we're open up our final polling question. This is polling question number 6. And the question is, what systems related to Sage Intacct should a user have a login for? And there's multiple options for the answer. So mark all that apply. Okay, so the correct answers for this question is going to be A, B, and C. So Sage Intacct, Sage Intacct Community, and the Sage Intacct Learning Center, the Help Center does not require a login. Melissa, you can.
Great, thank you. Okay, let me go back to that one. So the second piece for inventory and order entry is commit quantity during order entry. Okay, so this is in the early adopter program as well. So you'll now have the ability to reserve an item on a sales order even before it has been picked. So we don't have to actually pick the item for that to kind of be, segregated out of inventory. We can go ahead and reserve it. That way it does not get sold somewhere else and we know that that item needs to be used. So again, that is in the early adopter program. If you are interested in enrolling in that to test it out, please let us know. But that functionality will be released sometime next year as well. All right, for those of you running lease accounting, so Sage Intacct has been doing several things to go ahead and ramp up for any lease accounting requirements that are coming out. So this is going to relate to ASC 842 and IFRS 16. Okay, so now with Sage Intacct lease accounting, you can capture lease master data. It will actually produce a schedule, so a payment schedule, lease liability, and right of use asset depreciation schedules. So once we actually enter that lease master data, it's going to produce any schedules that we need for us. It will give you the ability also to do easy modifications and remeasurements of leases from those schedules. And of course, it's going to help you comply with those GAAP and IFRS standards. Now, Sage Intacct Payroll, powered by ADP. If you are part of the Sage Intacct conference, you probably heard this talked about quite a bit. So Sage Intacct has partnered with ADP to go ahead and provide payroll within the system. I know a lot of you, are using payroll outside of the system, doing journal entry imports and things like that. So this is going to be integrated together automatically. So several ways that connection is going to flow together. One is going to be through journal entries. So now when payroll is run in ADP, powered, Sage Intacct Payroll powered by ADP, then it's going to go ahead and create those journal entries automatically for you in Sage Intacct. New hire information that is entered into ADP will then flow to the Sage Intacct employee record automatically. Expense reports entered in Sage Intacct Time and Expense module will flow to ADP for payroll reimbursement. Reimbursement of those expenses on somebody's paycheck in ADP will then flow back to Sage Intacct Time and Expense and mark that expense report as paid. You'll also have the ability to have project-based timesheet data from Sage Intacct flow into ADP. So if you want people entering their time into Sage Intacct and hopefully using Sage Intelligent Time if you're doing that, because that is really, really handy. Once those are entered on project and task basis, that can all be synced over to ADP for payroll processing. Dimension values, so any dimension that's created in Sage Intacct is going to flow over to the time and attendance labor charge fields. That's just kind of what ADP calls it, labor charge field, but it's the same thing as a dimension. So all of those values will flow back and forth as well. And then payroll liabilities will flow from payroll into the accounts payable module of Sage Intacct. So if you are interested in any of that workflow being automated, this might be a solution that is right for you. So please reach out to your account manager and we can get you a demonstration of that solution. All right, a couple more things in regards to audit season coming up. So of course we had the compliance that came out within the Help Center in that PDF. There's also a couple new audit history reports available. So if you go to Platform Services, Custom Packages, click on that button for Package Library, you will see these two reports out there. And if you click Install, that will install those both into your environment and those will be available for use. I definitely suggest downloading these. All right, so taxes, 1099 season is coming upon us. So some new things for 1099. There is an on-demand training available in those release notes. So please feel free to click on that if we have somebody, new in our organization that's going to be handling 1099s this year. There's also a step-by-step guide in PDF that you can print out that's really helpful. There's also hyperlinks for the order forms, for those 1099 forms, and instructions on running 1099 reports, as well as exporting your file. There is also coming soon, and I do not have a date, and I hate when they do this. I wish they would just give me a date, but they are going to have 1099 e-filing powered by Tax Bandits. Now, I do not know if the coming soon means that will be before the January deadline. If so, that will be great. And if so, we will definitely make sure we send out a marketing blast to everybody to let you guys know that that's available. But if not, obviously it will be available by next year. Now, Sage Intelligent Time. So for anybody keeping track of timesheets in Intacct, if you are using those timesheets in Intacct, if you're not using Sage Intelligent Time, I would definitely recommend exploring using this. So this right now, this is expanding to nonprofits now, so they can track by grant, funder, and task. So it wasn't available to nonprofits before, but it is now. And this tool is very, very handy. As you can see in that snippet over there to the right, it can actually bring in your calendar meetings into that area over there on the left right here. So it can bring in your calendar events. It can bring in your computer activity as well. So how long was I in a spreadsheet? How long was I in a certain internet site? So it can really, really help you streamline and see how many hours you're actually spending on certain tasks that might go to a certain grant for nonprofits or a certain project. Okay. User experience updates. Sometimes it's the little things that matter the most. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 user experience updates. One is going to be the new user tour, some label changes within the interface, and list views that are in beta testing at the moment that will be out soon. So our first one is the new user tour. So now in Sage Intacct, you will see a bullhorn. If you click on that bullhorn, there's a product tours area, and that will bring somebody through the Getting Started with Sage Intacct video and give them a tour of the environment. So that can be really, really helpful for your new users. User label changes. So the thing that used to be called Create 1099 File is now called Export 1099 File. And that's because you exported it. So it makes a lot more sense with that name change right there. Also, the 1099 area for the forms and the export and all of that used to be in the reporting section of the AP menu, which it kind of didn't make too much sense because it was more of an activity you're doing and not a report. So they have actually moved all of that to the transactional section of AP. So if you're looking for your 1099 stuff and you can't find it, you should now see it in just that middle transactional area. It won't be over there in the reports anymore. Now list views, so this is in beta testing right now. It will be coming out soon in the next probably 1 or 2 releases of next year. But some of the things they are testing that's really exciting is in your list view. So list view is like if we go into AP and bills, right? And we just see our list of bills and you have all those different columns and Intacct just kind of gives you the columns that they think is important. So now you're going to be able to very, very easily edit and adjust those. So one of the things is called columns in motion. You'll be able to drag and drop those columns, resize those columns. So all those columns that are cutting off and you can't see the whole thing, you'll be able to make those bigger or make the ones smaller that you need smaller. You'll be able to sort them and freeze them. So if you need to freeze certain columns, you can do that as well. They will have more standard custom views. So right now it's just like one standard view and then you have to make your own, right? So now they're going to have some more standardized ones that people just use regularly, which will be great. They'll have some more advanced filtering available. They'll also have split views available. So you can have one view on one side and one view on the other side. And they're going to have a multiple rows bulk delete type of functionality. Okay, so again, this is in beta testing, but this will be coming out the beginning of next year sometime, and that's really, really exciting. Okay, and so we are done with the new release section of this.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa. I don't see any questions right now, but certainly, we are here to help you. So if there's something you think of even after today, please send us an email at info@lbmctech.com. Now we're going to have Mitch McCaw to present. He's going to talk about how you can transform your finance operations with innovative technology like Chipotle's end-to-end AP solution. And bonus, they will be treating you to lunch with a gift card that will be coming your way very soon. So,
Thank you,
Mitch,
Sarah.
I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Lovely. Let me just make sure I share my screen. Are you guys seeing my screen okay?
Not yet.
Okay, give me 1 second here.
There we go. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks, Melissa, for that. Yeah, appreciate everyone joining today, and thank you for LBMC for having me. I've had the pleasure of getting to know quite a few account managers at LBMC that that you folks work with, and it's just been a pleasure getting to work alongside them and just learning more about how we can help finance teams become more efficient and their companies more profitable. So yeah, I wanted to thank everyone for staying on for what might be possibly the most exciting part of your entire week, which is learning about none other than Tipalti's procure to payment solution. Quick intro on my side. I've been working with Tipalti for actually exactly 1 year. Today is my 1 year anniversary at Tipalti. Nothing I would want to be doing more than be here with you fine folks. So again, thank you for having me. Also want to apologize in advance for the weak attempt of a mustache that you have to look at for the next 20 minutes. I know you all hate it. My girlfriend definitely does, but it's for a great cause, and I appreciate y'all putting up with it. But it's also a friendly reminder to don't forget to donate to Movember. So for today, like I mentioned, not going to take up a whole bunch of time, but I definitely want to start by talking a little bit about kind of the current state of payable operations. Tipalti's been in business for about 20 years now, and we've really seen quite the shift in process of how companies have adapted to a lot of things going on with the economy, globalization, inflationary pressures, and some of these things are definitely a lot more relevant for what we're seeing today. So I'll do a brief introduction with Tipalti and how we can kind of prepare your team for the future by automating and simplifying really that entire accounts payable and supplier payments workflow. If there's one thing that you take away from today's presentation, it's that a lot of these manual tasks that you've seen handled by AP clerks and accounting managers and people that are way overqualified to be doing manual data entry, is that we can help kind of scale more efficiently and provide you the foundation so that you can keep up to date with all things compliance and regulations. That's definitely a piece that I heard Melissa talking about quite a bit, and we'll talk about that piece as we kind of approach the 1099 season and how you guys can ensure that you're being compliant. So I'll kind of start here by talking about a little bit of background on really what we've seen and the changes that finance teams are facing today. As I'm sure you're all aware, the role of finance has definitely broadened over the past couple decades, specifically in probably the last 5 to 10 years, of really beyond the core responsibilities of accounting and bookkeeping, financial reporting and analysis. Finance leaders are definitely playing much more of a prominent role in strategy, in mergers and acquisitions, globalization, a whole lot more. And obviously CFOs have become, prominent as the voice of, company investor relations and communications to the board, and, much more involved in the company's direction and decisions about technology. So, we find that finance leaders are in this critical role to navigate their companies through, difficult periods like we're going through now by driving more efficiency and establishing things like cost controls. So what we found, and this is actually according to the IOFM, the Institute of Finance and Management, is that accounts payable is the #1 most manual and time-consuming function in finance today. And obviously that's going to stand in the way of, finance modernizing and automating and having a higher standard of doing more, strategic tasks. So our take is that, considering it is the most time-consuming activity, it can be automated relatively quickly and essentially put on autopilot for you. Tipalti is actually a Hebrew word that translates directly to "we handled it," implying that we handle about 80% of the entire AP workflow. So you can really offload as much as that manual work as possible and allow you to kind of scale without adding additional resources to your team. So really what we've seen, and again, these are some statistics that we've taken from trend reports directly from the IRS as well. But the problem is that the back-end processes today are still so manual, which takes a lot of effort to get done. And considering, there's just these changing landscape to how people are paying their how people are paying their vendors, where their vendors are located, the changes with regulatory and tax compliance, and just dealing with all things kind of current economic situations. We've typically seen that companies are looking to again, offload as much of this work as possible. Onboarding suppliers is often done very manually via phone or email, which obviously isn't very secure. And because of this process, collecting bank details is very manual and obviously prone to human error. There's no capacity to validate information via, comparing it to the IRS database and ensuring you're not paying any bad actors. And then along with that, we typically see companies have a payment error rate of 3% or higher, which just adds a lot more workload if it does get kicked back to you. So another piece is obviously the processing of invoices. That usually gets a collective groan from the team with, many companies that are buried by paper invoices that require manually rekeying back into Intacct, and time spent chasing down approvals, which is why that we've seen that the average all-inclusive cost to process an invoice is $20. Let me repeat that for the people in the back of the room there. The average cost to process an invoice is $20 on average. Obviously, that scales depending on the amount of employees you have and the amount of invoices, but average being $20. And then on the payment front, being able to deal with suppliers who prefer paper checks, adds obviously more paperwork and manual effort for approvals and printing and signing checks. As your supplier base increases, payment processes get more complex with the related workload increases and time spent managing those payment runs. And obviously adding more fraud and compliance risk to your AP process. We've seen a lot of companies transitioning to the digital world of ACH payments, because I'm sure you guys have seen it where the postage is, backing up your check payments. There's a lot of fraud with checks, and it takes longer for those funds to land. So, we definitely support a lot of those different payment methods, but transitioning companies to a more digital world for payments. Same thing with supplier communications, from payment status inquiries to issue resolution for rejected payments. People calling into your AP department of where's my money. So that's all really offloaded. I'll talk about in a little bit here with Tipalti. And then obviously at month end, quarter end, year end, reconciling with Intacct is also pretty time consuming and often involving a lot of spreadsheets kind of stitched together. The tax piece is something that we've seen come up a lot more as the IRS has really cracked down on the not filing 1099 and 1042 reports accurately. So we typically see that 50% of companies don't actually collect tax forms until the end of the year, or are regularly collecting them. But again, like I mentioned, the IRS is really cracking down on that, so you have to worry about it as well. It's a hectic process, and it happens time and time again, and it's not getting any easier, which is why we described it again as risky, chaotic, manual, and very inefficient. But these challenges can have a real impact on your business, which is really hard to be efficient and scale your company and stay in compliance when you're being dragged down by these manual processes. So to talk a little bit about how we can free your finance team to lead this modern business initiative, we'll talk a little bit about kind of how we can add value to enabling businesses to scale efficiently, again, without needing to add additional resources. So these are some of the things that we've seen as the economic market has kind of expanded to having inflationary pressures and supply chain issues and things of that nature. So we're really providing finance teams with this modern technology that allows them to streamline this and de-risk their process. And that really starts again with the efficiency piece, that we're eliminating about 80% of the AP workload. So we provide this one unified solution from procurement to payment. Some companies take a crawl, walk, run approach into that, which is totally understandable. But really, we can do everything from supplier management to global tax compliance, purchase order management, invoice processing, PO matching, global payments, and reconciliation back into Intacct as well. From a cost control standpoint, that's obviously top of minds for CFOs today, where many organizations lack effective processes to and controls over employee buying activity. And Tipalti, with Tipalti, companies are able to curb that spending by instituting purchase order management, again, that PO matching, reducing transaction costs from switching from check to ACH, or for your international vendors, e-checks, as well as the less fraud prone options for payments, and reducing payment errors and bank penalty fees, and preventing penalties from the IRS as well. There's nothing worse than being hit with a B notice from the IRS. Those are pretty darn expensive. The financial controls, we definitely control a lot of the spending activities with built-in role-based securities and fraud detection, audit logs, signatory rights. So even with the transition into a digital world for accounts payable, you're not losing that visibility and control into your payables. So we can streamline, again, the reconciliation across different entities, geographies, currencies, payment methods, et cetera, et cetera. And just having more visibility into all this and accelerating. Often we're seeing companies being able to accelerate their close by about 25% and having more real-time insight into their spend. Another piece here that we are hearing quite a bit in the industry is the time to value. There's a lot of systems out there that claim they can get you up and running and overpromise when it comes to implementation. And some vendors are promised implementation in a couple of days or even hours. And we're hearing that the time to market is very important. But if companies can get their implementation, and if they can't get their implementation and the integration into Intacct wrong, it can obviously cause some major issues and headaches. So we have a proven track record of getting customers live in less than 3 weeks. We have dedicated implementation customer support teams to help you do so. And then lastly, if you're growing and scaling, doing more with less. As more invoices and payments, global suppliers, subsidiaries, audit controls, Tipalti is built to easily rapidly handle these changing needs without requiring more resources. And our pricing model is kind of a sliding scaling model built to support economies of scale, so that you can add additional products, features, users without breaking the bank. So I'll get into a little bit more of the exciting stuff here of exactly what it is that we do. Give you a little bit of a peek over the fence into some of the modules and features and capabilities that Tipalti has. So this is kind of the elevator pitch of the solution, if you will, where we really start at 12 o'clock here with the supplier management piece in order to help companies start that transition to a more digital experience. So our supplier management is essentially this white labeled self-service registration portal that takes vendors anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes to set up. We're not naive enough to think that we're going to get a complete 100% conversion rate for your vendors to come in and register with Tipalti, but ultimately you can go in and obviously upload and onboard on their behalf if they're like a small mom and pop shop, or a massive like AWS or FedEx or anything like that. So but ultimately this supplier portal helps you focus on value added tasks by pushing that data entry over onto your vendors, so you can collect their payment information, contact information, banking information, instead of your AP department handling this manually. Melissa touched on this quite a few times with discussing that 1099 season is upon us, and we have a KPMG approved tax engine that helps you stay compliant with IRS tax provisions, and digitally collects your W-9, and if you have international vendors, W-8 tax forms. So we go all the way through that process, all the way to the 1099 prep reporting, and we have partners like Tax Bandits that Melissa had mentioned, 1099tax.com, that can complete that entire filing process. But it's just much easier because Tipalti obviously is going to have your vendor's contact information, their banking information, their payment information, their remittance information, all centralized within one platform that obviously pushes back into Intacct as well, so that you can file a lot quicker. And obviously improve your spend control. As I mentioned earlier, we have this optional module that is a purchase order module with a built-in PO management solution with very user-friendly purchase requisitions, approvals, vendor selection, budget visibility, different dashboards you can understand and control Maverick spend, while also understanding how you're trending towards budgets. So that PO piece entangled as well with invoice management. You can actually do invoice and PO matching automatically through Tipalti. So to ensure that you have that touchless invoice processing, so that you guys can really just, again, focus not as much on the manual coding and entering of information. The payments piece, again, just continuing that automation of the soup to nuts, everything from an AP standpoint, where we have the ability, we're a licensed money transmitter, registered by the US Treasury, so similar regulations to a bank, where we essentially have the ability to transmit fast, secure, accurate payments across the world in over 196 countries, 120 different currencies, 6 different payment methods, without having to maintain banking relationships or set up a new bank account. So we handle all of that on your behalf. If you have international vendors, that's definitely one thing that allows us to stand out from other competitors, is we help save time and money on foreign exchange with built-in FX competitive rates, and the ability, like I mentioned earlier, to offer different payment methods like SEPA payments. And then lastly, just that reconciliation and reporting. So, automating, once a bill has been paid, you're not needing to go back then into Intacct and marking the bill is paid. Tipalti handles all of that reconciliation for you automatically. Just so you know that we're not 10 people building this software out in a basement somewhere. This is kind of like the Tipalti resume here. There's actually some companies specifically in Tennessee. I specifically work with small to medium-sized businesses in Tennessee, but I do want to mention that we don't discriminate. We work with companies in all industries, have over 2,500 customers. One of the things that I really just wanted to highlight here is that we have a 98% customer retention rate. That's mostly because we've received about 550 million in funding to date and invest so much of that back into the product. Like the purchase order management we invested in a couple of years ago. We're now moving towards virtual cards, offering credit card to manage more, just everything under the spend umbrella. And next on the roadmap is expense management. So really becoming that financial operations platform, not replacing your ERP, not replacing Intacct, but really just kind of filling the gaps for things that aren't managed historically very well within traditional ERPs. So lastly, before I let you guys go, and again, appreciate everyone's time here, is really just making sure that you're aware that we have a really, really strong integration with Sage Intacct. And this includes support for multi-entity integrations, multi-currency, real-time auto sync. So there's no manual work needed to push and pull information between systems, and really just that bi-directional sync of things like vendor information, as you can see here, syncing invoices and bills, purchase orders, goods received notes, vendor contact information, so that you can keep your vendor master data as clean as humanly possible. So do want to mention we're obviously a Sage Tech partner, and like I mentioned, I work very closely with a lot of your LBMC account managers. That's pretty much it for me today. I do want to thank you for your time. Like I mentioned, I do work very closely with a lot of the team members here, but can open it up to any questions in the chat. I know that you guys are all muted here, but obviously, please do reach out to any of your account managers, so that we can give them credit for working alongside us and helping us kind of solve some of these very manual, time-consuming issues that we typically see a lot of companies facing, like yourself. And happy Movember.
Thank you, Mitch. I don't see any questions right now, but certainly send any questions over that you have about Tipalti. Thanks for going over such great time and money saving solutions. That was great. Well, I know we covered a lot today, and if there's any questions you think of after today, please reach out to your account manager or send us an email at lbminfo@lbmctech.com. We will be sending out an email in a couple days with links to the recording and presentation. It will also include a survey, and we'd love to get your feedback on this presentation and also learn about what topics you'd like to hear more about. So thanks so much for attending today, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.